Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. The Mantell UFO incident is one such story. While many will write this mystery off as having been solved, I myself cannot come to that conclusion. I therefore will leave it to you, the listener, to decide for yourself what to believe after hearing the individual eyewitness accounts, those of various military personnel, regarding the strange, unidentified flying objects they saw on January 7, 1948, from no less than 3 military bases in Kentucky and Ohio. For those who haven't watched the episode Strange Lights Over Kentucky, which is linked in the description, don't worry if you haven't watched that episode yet, as either of these videos can be watched independently, and I will briefly recap the story in this video for the sake of clarity. The UFO incident in early 1948 was highly publicized at the time, appearing in various newspapers and magazines in the weeks following, primarily due to the incident resulting in the death of an experienced and decorated World War II pilot, Captain Thomas F. Mantell, when he attempted to chase an unknown object into high altitudes, and because his plane was not equipped for high-altitude flights, he likely succumbed to oxygen deprivation during his ascent, fell unconscious, and then crashed. The question of why an experienced pilot would risk his life to perform such a reckless maneuver, a pilot who knew full well that a flight over 15,000 feet without oxygen equipment was dangerous under any circumstances, never seems to have been answered. One of his close friends is quoted as saying that he could only assume Mantell was attempting to identify something, an attempt that he believed to be more important than his life or his family. Because of his death, the first object, or possibly a combination of multiple objects, that were spotted over Kentucky before Mantell's crash were thoroughly investigated by the military after the fact. Ultimately, in searching for practical answers, these objects were presumed by Air Force investigators to be a combination of the planet Venus, shining brightly on the horizon during the afternoon daylight, as well as either one or more top-secret weather balloons or other aircraft flying at high altitudes. The combined effect of the planet Venus and these various aircraft and balloons, coincidentally being in the same vicinity of each other, were said to have confused Captain Mantell, if not the many other eyewitnesses on the ground, with the final object Mantell was chasing being said to be a weather balloon flying overhead at more than 60,000 feet. However, while those answers seem reasonable, even accepting the possibility of multiple weather balloons and other aircraft being in the same vicinity of each other and creating the confusion, only hours after his plane crashed, and with the object he was chasing having disappeared, another bright object was spotted near a separate military base, this one being 200 miles further northeast in Ohio. During the secondary event, this object performed a series of strange and very fast vertical and horizontal movements before disappearing, which observers would remark made it nothing like a balloon, a planet, or any known aircraft. It was then spotted a second time from a third military base in Ohio, where it again conducted a series of strange aerial movements before disappearing. However, despite these secondary events taking place in the same day as Mantell's death, the Air Force report does not seem to consider that this very strange object might have been involved in his death. And it's worth mentioning that despite being seen over 200 miles away, about 4 hours after Mantell's plane crashed, this secondary object was seen by multiple experienced Army and Air Force personnel at 2 separate bases in Ohio, and they estimated its fast aerial movements to exceed speeds of over 500 miles per hour. So saying, that information along with the other information detailed in the Strange Lights Over Kentucky episode, and by that I mean the details surrounding the Air Force's conclusion about what Mantell was chasing, it certainly makes you wonder if it really was a weather balloon, as the Air Force said. For your interest, the following accounts are some of the various eyewitness statements given by military personnel from these 3 events, beginning chronologically with those from the early afternoon, those of the Godman Field personnel stationed at Fort Knox, Kentucky. Statement of Tech Sergeant Quinton A. Blackwell. I, Tech Sergeant Quinton A. Blackwell, was on duty as a chief operator in the control tower at Godman Field, Kentucky on the afternoon of 7 January 1948. Up until 13:15 or 13:20, matters were routine. At approximately that time, I received a telephone call from Sergeant Cook, Colonel Hicks's office, stating that according to Fort Knox Military Police and Elizabethtown State Police, there was a large circular object from 250 to 300 feet in diameter over Mansville, Kentucky, and requested I check with Army Flight Service to see if any unusual type aircraft was in the vicinity. Flight Service advised negative on the aircraft and took the other info, requesting our CO verify the story. Shortly afterward, Flight Service gave Godman Tower positions on the object over Irvington, Kentucky, and then Owensboro, Kentucky, of about the same size and description. About 1345 or 1350, I sighted an object in the sky to the south of Godman Field. As I wanted verification, I called my detachment commander, First Lieutenant Orner, to the tower. After he had sighted the object, he called for the operations officer, Captain Carter, over the teletalk box from the traffic desk. He came upstairs immediately and looked at the object through the field glasses in the tower. He then called for the CO, Colonel Hicks. He came to the tower about 1420 and sighted the object immediately. About 1430 to 1440, a flight of 4 P-51s approached Godman Field from the south, en route from Marietta, Georgia to Standiford Field, Kentucky. As they passed over the tower, I called them on B channel, VHF, and asked flight leader if he had enough gas, and if so, would he mind trying to identify an object in the sky to the south of Godman Field. He replied in the affirmative and made a right turn around with 2 planes and proceeded south from Godman Field. The 4th plane proceeded on to Standiford Field alone. The 3-ship formation proceeded south on a heading of 210 degrees, climbing steadily. About 1445, the flight leader reported seeing the object ahead and above, "I'm still climbing," to which a wingman retorted, "What the hell are we looking for?" The leader reported at 15,000 feet that the object is directly ahead of and above me now, moving about half my speed. When asked for a description, he replied, "It appears to be a metallic object of tremendous size." The flight leader then reported, "I'm still climbing, the object is above and ahead of me, moving at about my speed or faster. I'm trying to close in for a better look." This last contact was at about 1515. About 5 minutes afterwards, the other 2 ships in the flight turned back. As the returning planes passed over Godman, one of the pilots reported, "It appears like the reflection of sunlight on an airplane canopy." Shortly afterward, the same pilot and plane took off from Standiford and resumed the search. He went to 33,000 feet, 100 miles south, and did not sight anything. I left the control tower shortly afterward. The foregoing statement is true and correct to the best of my knowledge. Quentin A. Blackwell. Statement of Detachment 733 TAC 5 Commander, Lieutenant Paul I. Orner. Following is an account of the sighting of unknown objects from the control tower on 7 January 48 at Godman Field. On the above date, at approximately 1400, a report came into the control tower through Master Sergeant Cook of a report of an unidentified object flying at terrific speed in the vicinity of Mansville. This call was canceled minutes later by the military police at Fort Knox, who had instructions from the Kentucky State Police. Very soon thereafter, several reports of the same nature came from Flight Service, saying this object was over Irvington and Owensboro, Kentucky. At the same time, an object was reported by Tech Sergeant Blackwell, Chief Control Tower Operator on duty. I was in the office of the commanding officer checking on the call from Fort Knox Military Police at this time. When the call was canceled, I was returning to the control tower to see the object sighted by them. I immediately went to the control tower and saw a small white object in the southwest sky. This object appeared stationary. I was unable to tell if it was an object radiating its own light or giving off reflected light. Through binoculars, it partially appeared as a parachute does, with bright sun shining on the top of the silk, but there also seemed to be some red light around the lower of it. The commanding officer, operations officer S2, and executive officer were called immediately. Several minutes after the object was sighted, a flight of 4 P-51s came over the field from the south. I instructed Tech Sergeant Blackwell to call the flight leader and ask if they had seen any evidence of this object. The flight leader answered negative, and I suggested to the operations officer that we ask them if they had enough gas to go look for this object. The tower operator was instructed to call the flight leader, and he answered yes to this question. 1 P-51 had permission from the flight leader to break formation and continue to where he landed several minutes later on their original flight path. The flight leader and 2 other planes flew a course of 210 degrees and in about 5 minutes sighted the object. At first, the flight leader reported it high and about 1/2 his speed at a direction of 12 o'clock. Shortly thereafter, the flight leader reported it at about his speed and later said he was closing in to take a good look. This was the last message from the flight leader. His wingman shortly thereafter reported the flight leader had disappeared. From pilots' reports in the formation, the flight leader was high and ahead of the wingman at about 15:15 to 15:30 when he disappeared. The wingman said he was breaking off with the other pilots to return to Standiford Field due to lack of gas. This was about 15:23 to 15:30. For messages transmitted by the formation, it is estimated that the flight leader was at 18 to 20,000 feet and the wingman at approximately 15,000 feet in a wide formation when the flight leader disappeared. All the other wingmen returned to Standiford Field. One wingman gassed up and got more oxygen and flew a second mission on the same heading of 210 degrees to a position of about 100 miles south of Gobbin Field to an altitude of 33,000 feet and did not sight the object. At about 16:45, when this pilot reported not seeing the object, I left the control tower. At about 17:35 Central Standard Time, I returned to the control tower and spotted a bright light, different than a star, at a position of about 240 degrees azimuth and 8 degrees elevation from the control tower. This was a round object. It seemed to have a dark spot in the center, and the object moved north and disappeared from the horizon at a point 250 degrees from the tower. The unusual fact about this object was the fact that it remained visible and glowed through the haze near the Earth when no other stars were visible, and did not disappear until it went below the level of the Earth, in a manner similar to the sun or moon setting. This object was viewed and tracked with the weather station theodolite from the hangar roof. Signed, Lieutenant Paul I. Orner. Statement of Captain James F. Dusler, Jr. At approximately 14:20, 7 January 1948, I accompanied Lieutenant Colonel E.G. Wood to the Gobbin Field Control Tower to observe an object hanging high in the sky south of Gobbin. Shortly after reaching the tower, Colonel Guy F. Hicks, the commanding officer, was summoned. It was at that time I first sighted the bright silver object. Approximately 5 minutes after Colonel Hicks came into the tower, a flight of 4 P-51s flew over Goddam. An officer in the tower requested that the tower operator call this flight and asked the flight leader to investigate this object if he had sufficient fuel. The flight leader, Captain Thomas F. Mantell, answered that he would and requested a bearing to this object. At that time, one member of the flight informed the leader that it was time for him to land and broke off from the formation. This aircraft commander was heard requesting landing instructions from his home field, Standiford, in Louisville. In the meantime, the remaining 3 P-51s were climbing on course given to them by Gobbin Tower towards this object that still appeared stationary. The tower then advised the flight leader to correct his course 5 degrees to the left. The flight leader acknowledged this correction and also reported his position at 7,500 feet and climbing. Immediately following the flight leader's transmission, another member of the flight asked, "Where in the hell are we going?" In a few minutes, the flight leader called out an object, 12 o'clock high. Asked to describe this object, he said that it was bright and that it was climbing away from him. When asked about its speed, the flight leader stated it was going about half his speed, approximately 180 miles per hour. Those of us in the tower lost sight of the flight, but could still see this object. Shortly after the last transmission, the flight leader said he was at 15,000 feet and still climbing after it, but that he judged its speed to be the same as his. At that time, a member of the flight called to the leader and requested that he level off, but we heard no reply from the leader. Signed, James F. Dusler, Jr. Statement of Captain Kerry W. Carter, United States Air Force. The undersigned was on duty at Goddam Field, 7 January 1948 as operations officer. At approximately 1400 hours and 7 minutes, I received a call from Lieutenant Orner, AACS Detachment Commander, that the tower had spotted an unidentified object and requested that I take a look. Lieutenant Orner pointed out the object to the southwest, which was easily discernible with the naked eye. The object appeared round and white, whiter than the clouds that passed in front of it, and could be seen through cirrus clouds. After looking through the field glasses for approximately 3 or 4 minutes, I called Colonel Hicks's office, advising that office of the object's presence. Lieutenant Colonel Wood and Captain Dusler came to the tower immediately. Colonel Hicks followed them. About this time, a flight of 4 P-51 aircraft were noticed approaching from the south. I asked Tech Sergeant Blackwell, tower operator, to contact the planes and see if they would take a look at the object for us. The planes were contacted and stated they had sufficient gas to take a look. One of the planes proceeded on to Standiford. The other planes were given a heading of 230 degrees. One of the planes said he spotted the object at 12 o'clock and was climbing toward it. One of the planes then said, "This is 15,000 feet, let's level out." One of the planes, at this point apparently the plane who saw the object, estimated its speed, the object's, at 180 miles per hour. A few seconds later, he stated the object was going up and forward as fast as he was. He stated that he was going to 20,000 feet and if no closer, was going to abandon the chase. This was the last radio contact I heard. It was impossible to identify which plane was doing the talking in the above report. Later we heard that one plane had landed at Standiford to get fuel and oxygen to resume the search. The undersigned reported to Flight Service a description and position of the object while the planes searched for it. Signed, Kerry W. Carter. Statement of the commanding officer, Colonel Guy F. Hicks. At approximately 1300 hours, a call came to this headquarters from State Police, reporting a flying object near Elizabethtown. Another report came in from Mansville about 10 minutes later. A third call came in from Lexington, Kentucky. All towns are south of Godman Field. We alerted the tower to be on lookout for flying objects. At 1445, the tower notified me that an object had been sighted at about 215 degrees. I went to the tower and observed the object until 1550 hours, when it disappeared behind the clouds. The object could be plainly seen with the naked eye, and appeared to be about 1/4 the size of a full moon, white in color. Through 8-power binoculars, the object seemed to have a red border at the bottom at times and a red border at the top at times. It remained stationary for 1.5 hours. When I arrived at the tower, Tech Sergeant Quentin A. Blackwell had contacted 3 P-51 airplanes over the field and suggested they have a look if they had sufficient fuel. When I arrived, they were within sight of the tower, heading on a course of 215 degrees. I heard one of the pilots report that he saw the object straight ahead and estimated the speed of 180 miles per hour. The pilot stated that the object was very large and very bright. Signed, Guy F. Hicks, Colonel, United States Air Force. Now, several hours after Mantell's plane crashed near the Kentucky-Tennessee border, and no doubt as Godman personnel were trying to locate the scattered pieces of his aircraft and begin their investigation into that incident, a new, unidentified object made an appearance 200 miles away to the northeast, near Lockbourne Army Air Base in Ohio. Air Force investigators would eventually state that the object Mantell had been chasing before he crashed was likely one or all of a combination of a bright Venus on the horizon and one or more weather balloons or aircraft flying overhead. Any appearance of fast movement by the objects, specifically the weather balloon Mantell was said to have been chasing, was attributed to the movement of clouds in front of the object, which created an illusion of speed. However, eyewitness accounts of this secondary object would be far more bizarre than Mantell's, specifically in their description of its rapid movements in multiple directions. This object was considered by none of the observers to be anything like a star, planet, balloon, or any known type of aircraft. Report of unusual circumstances from Lockbourne Tower radio operator Albert Pickering. On Wednesday, January 7, 1948, at about 1925 Eastern Time, I observed in the sky an object which I could not identify. It appeared to hover in one position for quite some time, moving very little. It disappeared once for about a minute, and I assumed it entered the overcast, which was at about 10,000 feet. After descending again below the overcast, it circled one place for the duration of 3 360-degree turns, then moved to another position to circle some more. Turns required approximately 30 to 40 seconds each, diameter estimated about 2 miles. In moving from one place to another, a tail was visible, or approximate 5 times the length of the object. Not knowing how close or far the object was from me at the time, I could not estimate the size very accurately, but it appeared as large or larger than one of our C-47 planes, and of a different shape, either round or oval-shaped. Just before leaving, it came to very near the ground, staying down for about 10 seconds, then climbed at a very fast rate back to its original altitude, 10,000 feet, leveling off and disappearing into the overcast, heading 120 degrees. Its speed was greater than 500 miles per hour in level flight. It was visible to me for a period of 20 minutes. No noise or sound could be detected. The color was amber light, but not sufficiently bright to cover or obscure the outline of the configuration, which was approximately round. During up-down movement, no maneuvering took place. Motion was the same as an elevator, climbing and descending vertically. Exhaust trail was noticeable only during forward speed. It appeared as a thin mist, approximately the same color, amber, as the object. Length about 5 times the length of the object. During descent, it appeared to touch the ground, or it was very close to touching it. It was approximately 3 to 5 miles away from Lockbourne Air Base in immediate vicinity of Commercial Point. It positively was not a star, comet, or any astronomical body to the best of my knowledge of such things. I also rule out the possibility of it being a balloon, a flare, dirigible, military, or private aircraft. I am 26 years old and in good health and have excellent vision. I've been actively engaged in aviation for 6 years. I have a private pilot license and spent 3 years, 10 months in the U.S. Army Air Corps as a Sergeant Link Trainer Instructor, Instrument Flight Observer. The statements made herein are true and accurate to the best of my knowledge and may be used for any official purpose as deemed necessary. Signed, Albert R. Pickering. Report of unusual circumstance from Lockbourne Airways operator Frank Isell. At approximately 1940 hours, January 7th, the control tower operator advised me that he had been observing a strange light in the southwest for some time. However, by the time I reached the entrance steps in front of the operations building, the light had disappeared. I had not returned to my position for more than 2 minutes when the tower operator advised the light had again appeared. I returned to the operations steps, and this time I saw the object. It was 15 degrees above the horizon to the west-southwest of Lockbourne, emitting a ruddy red light, changing to amber yellow at intervals not exceeding 1 to 2 seconds. Its size and magnitude was greater than that of any star. Good comparison of size and magnitude would be with one of the runway lights turned on at full intensity as viewed from a distance of 500 feet. Its shape appeared to be circular, with the exception of a thin wisp of tail extending towards the horizon, the tail's length being 5 diameters of the object long. From the time I first saw the object to approximately 1950 hours, it appeared to remain motionless in the sky. At this time, the object descended to the horizon in an interval of about 4 seconds, hovered on the horizon for about 3 seconds, and then ascended to its original position in an interval of 3 seconds. Its course was elliptical, counterclockwise. It then faded and lowered towards the horizon and disappeared at about 1955 hours. There was no sound audible from the object at any time. Its distance appeared to be about 5 miles from Lockbourne. However, information was received from Clinton County Tower that they too observed a similar or the same object in the same general direction and position at the same time as our observations at Lockbourne. If the object was the same, the distance would be much greater than 5 miles, the velocity well to the excess of 500 miles per hour. The object actually looked to be traveling at a speed around 500 miles per hour.